Hiya! Welcome to this, my 61st episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled Watching Terrible Movies, I get together with friend of the podcast, Jesse Zimran, for a real schlockfest. But first, I celebrate the work of fallen Python Terry Jones, feature Syfy's Sanctuary, plus David Allen Grier, new seasons of The Magicians and Miracle Workers, more Doctor Who, and The Good Place gets a glorious send-off. Welcome to the show. He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on video. Fuzzy. This weekend I checked out a coffee shop that opened up north of us recently, The Balancing Goat. That name is from, they also operate a yoga studio. So yoga, coffee and yoga. Not bad at all. Coffee's alright. It was pretty busy the day I was there. I had trouble finding a seat near an outlet. My usual haunt is better set up for plunking down and writing all afternoon. Even after I snagged one, the seating over the long term was a bit grim. It's a new place. It's beautiful. The weather Saturday could not have been nicer. Sunny and clear, temps in the 40s. Happy February, everyone. And the views overlooking the high school north of town here are fantastic. The coffee's okay and the food is great. What's really going to tip the balance between access or convenience is the atmosphere. City Brew is more of a college-oriented space, and as I've mentioned more than once, I really enjoy the music they pipe in while I'm writing this up. Comfort and facility contributes as well, but hey, hard to miss how busy they were. I wish them the best. Now on VideoFuzzy, a fond reflection. Oh wow, in episode 20, nearly 2 years ago to the moment, I was talking about the origins of this podcast and the swirling mists of forgotten time, VHS recordings of MTV's edited rebroadcasts of Monty Python's Flying Circus. Since then, I've talked at some length about my fondness for that troupe and their work. I dedicated the bulk of an interview to refreshing that memory in episode 30 and numerous times since then. So I was saddened to learn of the recent passing of Terry Jones, among the founding members of the troupe, and astonished to note that the very week of this news I was cataloging disc 838, which features BBC America rebroadcasts of the troupe in my classic collection, and BBC American rebroadcasts of the troupe in my current collection on disc X298, featuring, in fact, one of their most iconic sketches, Terry Jones in drag as waitstaff, listing the day's specials, including, as I'll recount from a menu board reposted by the Reduced Shakespeare Company: egg and bacon, egg sausage and bacon, egg and spam, egg bacon and spam, egg bacon sausage and spam, spam bacon sausage and spam, spam egg spam bacon and spam, spam egg and spam, spam baked beans spam and spam, and today's special lobster thermidor au cravats with a mornay sauce garnished with truffle pate, brandy, and a fried egg on top, and spam, spappity spam, wonderful spam, spappity spam, wonderful spam. Holy Christ, how did... The cultural contributions alone... I posted on my own page, day of, a favorite screen cap of Jones's, Rectorate, St. Looney of the cream bun and jam, and lunatic religion advocacy of the power of prayer to turn the face purple. Other creations I recall include the bishop, I referenced back in episode 50, Monsieur Creosote in The Meaning of Life. He played the impossibly funny Five Penny Please, Mr. Horton, and countless others. I also referenced him in episode 43 in a Buster Keaton-esque tribute of a man desperately seeking a private space to change into his bathing suit, culminating in a burlesque striptease. Fearless. So, in response to the announcement, along with the screen cap, I posted a huge part of his masterful comedy shone through his empathy. He would play, in turns, ridiculous, over-the-top, and outrageous characters, but you had a sense on some level that he loved them. He took their voices into his care, and his soul shone through. Yep, all the way to his exploded ribcage at times, but it was all part of the joy that came off of him in waves, lent strength to the stories he told in his delightful creations. Fly free, Sir Bedivere, and flights of unladen swallows sing thee to thy rest. My love to Graham. Friday Night Feature. As I mentioned last time, I've started encountering episodes from Syfy's 2008 production of Sanctuary, starring Amanda Tapping as the she-looks-damn-good-for-her-age Dr. Helen Magnus, custodian of a castle full of cryptozoological curiosities that goes otherwise unnoticed in New York, why not? On discs 840 and 841, I found the follow-up to the premiere episode, Fata Morgana. The team, Magnus, Robin Dunn as her new associate psychiatrist Will Zimmerman, and Emily Ullerup as her daughter Ashley, are on a craggy Scots Isle in the middle of a stormy night, sneaking up on a mausoleum, crouching to avoid detection. Will, apparently at no point in their transatlantic enterprise, was ever briefed on the lay of the land, the object of their search, or, once in place, the purpose for their stealth. Helen explains, "It's a crypt, potentially containing an elixir capable of prolonging life for centuries. Such secrets are rarely left unguarded." Zipping right past the reliability of their sources, which Helen in the moment dismisses out of hand, upon which they base their midnight mausoleum geocaching, at that moment skull-headed robed creatures appear, the crypt keepers, and because reasons, the team go in guns blazing. Helen and Ashley shoot dozens of crypt keepers as Will himself enters the mausoleum, where he finds 3 sarcophagi. He, quite by chance, stumbles onto the unlock mechanism, whereupon the sarcophagi open, and he discovers 3 young women in suspended animation. As La Magni fight off a few more skull heads, the team brings the women back to headquarters. Back in New York, Ashley is off to do battle with the disruptive abnormal, a subterranean chameleon-type creature. It seems the default setting on Helen's Sanctuary operation is search and contain, but it's never too far away from destroy, belying the protective quality in its name. But I'm sure we'll all learn the whys and wherefores as we give it a chance. For now, it appears that Helen is benignly disposed to some abnormals and more violently towards others, especially those who stand in her way, and is happy enough to send her highly trained daughter out to either collect or dispatch them as per her inclination. As for Will's reaction to all this, 3 not-so-dead women found in coffins, he says, just another day at the office. Now, here's where I had the greatest respect for the writing team on this production. We haven't had 2 hours with this universe. 96% of its storytelling is yet to come. We know something is going on with Helen, Dr. Magnus, but we're not sure what. But she's essentially in charge of the Kool-Aid. So Will, as a psychiatrist, steps in as a Scully of the piece, sufficiently knowledgeable about basic scientific inquiry, and he raises perfectly valid questions. How are these women alive, he asks. How are they communicating with us? They're talking about surviving the plague, which ended in Europe at around the year 800 AD. We wouldn't understand each other, he said, and suspended animation cults my butt. The human body can't survive in suspended animation for 1,200 years. I don't care what kind of special bath products you use. Helen agrees. More importantly, she asks, why are the keepers so anxious to stop Sanctuary from accessing the crypt and these women? She suggests the women may have a propensity for violence. Glass houses, lady. She notes the cult is marked to the women, so whatever the reasons, the skull-headed crypt keeper cult, they find the name Caballus Nocturnum, considers the women to be their property, and their leader, oh, well, he's got a face at least, charters the next available flight to New York so as to recover them. Danu, the one who woke up first, says creatures, presumably the crypt keepers, came to her village, took them, and then she woke up here. She's never seen anything like this facility, she said. Light, but no candles. Warmth without fire. She has no sense of the passage of time. As the others awaken, the sisters hold each other's hands. There's some early suggestion that they communicate through touch. When she woke up, Will asked her several questions, but she didn't speak before she touched his face, potentially reading him. Danu touched Will and then held her sister's hands, and suddenly they're using words like diagnosis, disorder, and captivating, a word that didn't enter the language ahead of the 1700s. But Helen used the word telesthetic, which means mind reading, which makes all of that okay. As she goes on, Danu can remember the creatures attacking them and making them drink something. As the women regain their strength, Helen finds lore that 3 fates would lead King Arthur's forces into battle, the Fata Morgana, laying waste to their enemies on the battlefield, hence the cult's interest in them. Will, in fact, discovers them floating in midair, spinning slowly, sparking equipment, disrupting Team Sanctuary's electronics, and knocking out the perimeter defense. As other Sanctuary inmates react and mysterious winds are loosed in the castle, Helen takes aim and shoots them full of elephant tranquilizers. The women collapse to the floor just as Caballus Nocturnum arrive at the castle. While all this is going on, Ashley's informer, Squid, says that Cabal didn't exactly vanish in the 19th century, as records indicate, so much as transform. Caballus Nocturnum is now in charge of tech firms, he said, medical and scientific research, biotech firms, military think tanks. He tells Ashley these guys are one James Bond film from global domination. So, if the Cabal were to regain control of the women, that global domination seems inevitable. The women regain consciousness as the cult members breach the castle defenses and they're chased through the catacombs, resulting in the firefight showdown with the cult. During a break in the fighting, Helen gives them the choice to renounce the Skullheads and stay at the castle under her protection. The Skullheads naturally oppose this plan. They've overrun the place in the wake of the women disrupting the castle's defenses, so the offer of protection seems light anyway, but the women are sufficiently lucid to realize wherever they stay the cult will target them, so... Oh hey, if they were slightly psychic, mystical military ordnance, how did Helen manage to trank them? Oh, never mind that. In the end, the women agree to return to the cult, but on their own terms. Team Sanctuary relents, but warns the Cabal that this is not over. And as they depart, Helen says, well, they chose to be free. What they do next is up to them. So, what just happened here? Well, despite Will raising perfectly valid questions, how are these women 1,200 years old? The best the show does is shrug and say, they're magic. They're witches, the cult made them drink something and kept them preserved in sarcophagi. They're mystical Arthurian military ordnance. They're magic. They're the Fata Morgana, that's how. Shut up. Plus, it occurred to me that everything Will was saying about this cult could easily be turned back on Team Sanctuary. Post-extraction, they were holding them. For their own protection, perhaps, or to keep them from the Cabal, who incidentally were holding them in stasis and not deploying them. One question that occurred to me didn't get a lot of scrutiny was, why now? Why did Sanctuary target the women for saving at that moment? Had they, as Helen suggested, merely received intel from a source, however reliable, and crossed an ocean to act on it, or was this somewhat darker? Ashley learned more about the Cabal was up to from her informant, but that was well after the team had secured, some might call it captured, these women. It's just... Helen, as we have learned by this point, I think, is very long-lived. Is she just chasing down any information about means of extending her life, or is there more to it than that? Or actually not. 3 episodes in, it's hard to know base-level priorities, but yeah, 3 women perfectly preserved and revived from 1,200-year comas are intrinsically interesting, regardless of their utility in battle. And turning it back around, learning what they had learned about the Caballus Nocturnum, would it not have been more responsible for Sanctuary to override the women's free will and kept them sedated and secured at the Sanctuary? I mean, it's gross either way. The women know what the cult will do, basically what it's done for centuries, kept them in stasis. Stockholm Syndrome? How did floating battle witch women get overpowered by the skull cult in the first place? But at least Helen gave them the option of staying with her before they left, and didn't stop them when they decided to leave. Yeah, Cool as it was to watch this show raise the questions it did towards the beginning, good, valid questions science fiction is often more comfortable glossing over. They just highlighted the lack of follow-through. If you apply logic at one point, you should be less flip about it when, later, women are floating in midair, women who, when deployed, would, per Arthurian lore, lay waste to enemy forces, but while they've regained sufficient power to float, merely cause a bit of localized chaos. They're not actually killing anyone even, but they are disrupting perimeter defenses, which... that's weird, right? I mean, they barely remember their lives from 9th century Scotland, but they're able to target sophisticated electronic defenses that incidentally are keeping them safe. Well, depending on what Helen's endgame is for them. Their instincts were to get out of there, so that's for sure still debatable. The Sanctuary ran for 4 seasons on Syfy from 2008 to 2011. I think I watched the first couple seasons at least. I know I was reacting more and more negatively to something as the show continued, but I'm pretty sure I archived a good chunk of it before giving up. The opening credits are so steampunky and awesome. Helen Magnus is a great character. Her interaction with Will was a draw, and the world the show created was reasonably cool, but for these and apparently other reasons, it just could not hold my interest long term. I will say this, Syfy and other cable companies have launched many series in the ensuing decade, and they have generally improved. A lot of the best of them have gone to premium cable and streaming services, and when I learned the FX production of Devs was actually going to run on Hulu, I was outraged. But there have been a lot of good ones. I've watched and archived and commented on many of them, and if shows like Sanctuary got us closer to what we've got now, all the better. Cross Connection. Real quick one this time on this. Sanctuary star Amanda Tapping has a recurring role as the dark, bureaucratic angel Naomi in Supernatural, so this show shows up with tight connections within my media collection. She was also in Millennium, huge fan of that show. Sanctuary's Robin Dunn appeared in American Psycho 2, All-American Girl, which I commented on in episode 37, so more ties there. And if I'm looking for Studio 6 Feet Under ties, Boston Legal's William Shatner appeared in that one, so 0 steps from 6 Feet Under's Ed Begley Jr. And I mentioned him up there. Terry Jones wrote Labyrinth, which further cements his cultural significance. David Bowie as Jareth singing Dance Magic Dance is just important. You remind me of the Babe. What Babe? The Babe with the power. What power? The power of voodoo. Hoodoo. You do what? Remind me of the Babe. And Jennifer Connelly as Sarah looking at him and saying, "You have no power over me," was a bomb going off across a generation. Just enormous. Uncredited, but he appeared as the voice of Sarah's mother in L.A. Story, which ties him to Steve Martin, and further to 6 Feet Under's Francis Conroy by way of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Tight connections all around. Going through my classic collection, I found appearances by Marc Vann and Nicholas Brendon in an episode of Criminal Minds. Actually, Brendon, he played Xander on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, had a recurring role over the course of 7 years with that series, so it was fun to see where he showed up in that series. And Marc Vann played the sinister Dr. Sparrow in a handful of 5th season episodes of Angel, as well as, he appears in a million things once, Golden Thread over here. Just from appearances in my collection, he was in Early Edition, Damages, The Practice, Boston Legal, Frasier, The Shield, Dirt, Grey's Anatomy, The Riches, Eli Stone, Monk, Lost, Lie to Me, Torchwood, and Medium. He was in quite a lot. Speaking of golden threads, I encountered the episode of The West Wing featuring Patrick Fischler. He played a NASA engineer tracking an asteroid on collision course with Earth and looked for all the world like he might be its envoy as an alien operative. And so many others, but as I'll be wrapping up my comments on The Good Place with this one, a guest appearance by Lisa Kudrow as ancient Greek philosopher Hypatia, Call Me Patty, livened up the run-up to the series finale on that one, and oh, wow, did they do a good job all the way through. Never any doubt, you guys rocked. Diving into my classic collection. Speaking of Terry Jones, I mentioned encountering his work throughout my most recent cataloging efforts. I loved his appearance in Disc 838 as the fop royal who late 19th century wags were tagging each other in a Monty Python Oscar Wilde sketch. Writers were one-upping each other at a party, aiming at pithy witticisms and just as often falling short when they just start throwing each other under a bus. Graham Chapman as Wilde reacts as John Cleese as James Whistler says, Your Majesty is like a great jam donut. What? The prince demands. Oh, that's one of Shaw's, he winks. They all turn on Michael Palin as contemporary playwright George Bernard Shaw, enjoying his discomfiture. Oh, I meant that, like a donut, your arrival gives us pleasure, and your departure just makes us hungry for more. Terry, as the prince, accepts the compliment warmly, which then Whistler says, Your Majesty is like a stream of bat piss. That's one of Wilde's. And Wilde is like, It thought he was not! That was Shaw's. And the prince turns on Shaw, who stammers, Oh, yeah, well, it's that you shine out like a shaft of gold when all around is dark. The prince is then compared to a dose of the clap, and so on. It's a funny sketch, followed on eventually by the all-London wife-swapping event, and then Terry Jones is an actor celebrated by the British Showbiz Awards in the title role of the Dirty Vicar sketch, wherein he is extraordinarily dirty, the comedy arising from a proper 19th century tea disrupted when the newly installed vicar comes running in, leers, gropes, and pounces one of the women over the back of a sofa, and then has a go at the other one in a potential reenactment of material evidence in a #MeToo trial. Sticking with the sketch comedy form for the moment, just in time for Black History Month, on Desk 839 I found a pilot episode of David Alan Grier's short-lived Chocolate News, a fun comic celebration of media from an African-American perspective. Grier opened with a clip of himself in the voice of late Dr. Maya Angelou, putting some thoughts together in anticipation of a possible victory of then-Senator Barack Obama in his run for the presidency. Just paraphrasing here, like a fresh breeze, you have risen from the painful experiential sense memory of the past. I christen you Hosanna, Obama. I pronounce you Prince, King, Pharaoh. Juxtaposed with a few perhaps less poetic thoughts she'd gathered in anticipation of John McCain's presidency. Ain't that a bitch? Chocolate News also highlighted the work of Roger Dunn, an intrepid reporter who happened to be white and whom Grier constantly assigned to black neighborhoods to cover stories likely to get him beaten up, like reactions to the verdict post the Rodney King beatings, gang initiation rights, East Coast-West Coast rapper feuds, that sort of thing. And the pilot episode was dedicated to his memory. Grier opened with remarks decrying hip-hop's devolving as a force for social justice to an engine of sexist self-promotion, and speaking of rappers, Chocolate News was, I believe, the only major news outlet to cover rapper Fat Man's booty-bouncing PSAs promoting the federal No Child Left Behind educational initiative, and then the N-word peace accords. Chocolate News was groundbreaking. As Grier himself described it, this is the only source for pure, uncircumcised realness from an Afrocentric perspective. Be it sports, politics, or human interest, as long as there is a brother involved, we get a kick it to you raw. Funniest damn fun to encounter this in my collection. In other Comedy Central productions, on Disc 836, I found where they were promoting the interstitial segments between The Daily Show and The Colbert Report, a brand new DVD compilation titled Who's the Toss, including some classic favorites as John Gets Angry, Alligators Love Marshmallows, Hey, You're Not Steven, The Pirate One, I Don't Think You Heard Me Right, Exotic Fish and the Tiger Cub Warehouse, Steven, Wake Up, I Didn't Know the Camera Was On, How'd You Get That Injury, Steven's Surprising Weekend, Gay Innuendos, Does This Look Infected, John, Mouthful of Pudding, Why the Goatee, Breaking Into Laughter, Parts 1 and 2, Evil Twin, John's Gay Tie, Steven Reviews Sex and the City, Two Hosts, One Cup, Suicide Pact, No, You Go First, and I'm All Out of Love. Fun shows. Like I said, plowing through these, I'm trying to pay less attention to the daily shows and Colbert's I encounter in this, but sometimes, like with David Alan Grier's cosplay of Dr. Maya Angelou, wow, it is fun to have these things around. Checking out my current collection. Last time I was so excited about the new season of Doctor Who, I completely skipped past having seen an animated reimagination of a lost episode that aired on BBC America of an original run season 4 serial starring Patrick Troughton titled The Makra Terror. The Doctor, second Doctor, encounters a colony of humans living down a mine that's run like a holiday camp, although it's impossible to ignore how hard everyone has to work at having a good time. They're cheered on by music that is desperately manic, and while sleeping, people are exposed to gas that makes them more compliant and diligent. So, they're working themselves to death for a seemingly benevolent overlord, but what's really going on is that all the cheerful industry is to create the exhaust and industrial waste that the real overlords, giant crab beings, need to maintain their smog-choked environment. Think Beijing pre-Olympics. Only one colonist can see what's really going on, but he's jailed and then sentenced to reorientation training. The Doctor and his companions are welcomed for their assistance with catching him, but quickly fall under suspicion for their general left-winginess and Badinskyism, which eventually reveals that Dear Leader is actually crab people, and everyone being so industrious is actually making things worse for them. Once the giant crabs are revealed, they're vanquished by fresh air and sunshine, and the glorious music and dancing continues. People still work, but their production targets get much more manageable, and actual happiness goes up. Okay, most of this is because a recent episode was so incredibly similar, but there was a less recent episode, Gridlock, from Season 3 of the reboot, 10th Doctor David Tennant, that reintroduces the Makra, and the concept is similar. Humans are in a near constant commute and destroying the environment with car exhaust. They all pretty much live in their cars, locked in constant gridlock, and the Makra reappear. The Doctor and his companion, Martha, jump from car to car trying to save the day, which seems about as likely as the last time the Makra showed up. The thing is that this is such a perennial theme for this show. The recent episode, Orphan 55, Graham activates a series of coupons that launch the team quite randomly to a paradise planet. They arrive at a gigantic reimagination of the Sydney Opera House, and it couldn't be nicer. Oh, there's a bit of a computer virus in the vending machine that takes physical form. That's weird. Even the presence of vending machines in an all-expense-paid luxury resort is a bit odd, and oh wow, they're twisted predatory tooth creatures who we discover shortly upon the Doctor and her team arrive that this paradise planet is just this relatively tiny enclosed space a commercial enterprise has managed to terraform with funding from tourists, and the whole planet is the used-up husk of its former self. Earth, in fact. The current inhabitants are evolved to breathe carbon dioxide, and their lives are cruel and brutish, wickedly inhuman, torturing the tourists they manage to get hold of. Doc makes a point of noting this isn't some alternate timeline, that it's absolutely a thing that could happen, that we would one day need to return and terraform our own planet sometime after off-worlding. The other conversation is that this planet was around for billions of years before us, will be around for billions of years after us, and its environment will be whatever it is, and has absolutely sucked in the past. No, I'm not saying we've got nothing to do. It's only responsible to treat this planet like it's the only place we have to live in the universe, because it is. Just, when this show gets preachy, it gets really preachy, and it feels like it does that a lot. More Fun was a recent episode introduced us to, there will be serious spoilers. If you're not caught up, skip ahead a bit. But yeah, if you're still here, we were introduced to a new Doctor in a Type 40 TARDIS. Nope, we have never met her before. Jo Martin is a regeneration of presumably William Hartnell at some point, possibly some alternate timeline. I mean, it's gotta be possible. We've had Daleks and Cybermen crash through from other dimensions. Romanov Devrat Nalanda stuck out there in E-space. Why not himself? In this case, herself, the classic engine room style with all the circle things on the wall, same chameleon circuit stuck in phone booth, and she'd rewritten herself via chameleon arch, posing as a music box as Ruth Clayton, Gloucester tour guide. But okay, well, the concern in this case is that she is a fugitive from the Jadoon, very much from this dimension, and, well, chameleon arch, she'd just be another human among billions. Tough to track. She's buried the TARDIS in a gravesite by a lighthouse far away, but it's not completely shut down, and she does have a companion looking out for her. Looks like he's been, Well, there's actually been a lot of dematerializing lately that's not quite killing people, just transporting them. So, for sure, with the follow-up episode Praxius from this past weekend, I'm sure I'll have more to say about all this once I... Oh, wow. You know, the reveal of this new Doctor was so huge. I forgot to mention Captain Jack is back. John Barrowman, face of Bo. Seriously, great to see him again. Looking forward to seeing where they're going with all this. Lots going on besides that. Season 15 of Supernatural just brought the Nephilim Jack back into the mix. Very exciting. I caught the third season opener of Sherlock they re-aired on the BBC America. Always quite entertaining. Enjoying that so far. And, oh wow, we had Sandra and Jerry's wedding on Superstore, finally. Carol snapped and threatened to murder Sandra's cat the night of the wedding, but Dina seriously saved the day in the most Dina way possible. Loved that. And the magicians, they're back. The crew has defeated the monster and restored magic to the world, but at enormous cost. Spoilers, well, it's been nearly a year, so I'm just going to talk about it. Season 5 on Syfy finds the characters all trying to deal with the death of Quentin Coldwater while encountering some weirdness. For example, magic is back, but when people try to use it, sometimes there are surges. There's so much magic that once rare disciplines like teleportation are now more common, and the school they're at, Breakbills, has so many students it's practically a state college, so Dean Fogg, desperate for instructors, pulls in Arjun Gupta's Penny 23 from the 23rd timeline, it's canon, to teach it. Meanwhile, in Fillory, the magical Narnia world in the piece, time has shooped forward 300 years, so Elliot, not the monster anymore, and Margot try to get the dwarf in charge of the clock at the center of the world to shift everything back, but instead he brings their friends, Josh and Fenn, forward 300 years. It's pretty wild. Someone's on a quest, someone's missing memories. Alice learns about Elliot and Quentin's life in the Day Mosaic quest while seeking to restore Quentin's soul to the underworld, and dude, it's all go on this show. I'm just sitting out here in the dark staring at all this and thinking, my God. And that's not even the most amazing here, but The Good Place, I won't be able to. It's been 4 years, and really, spoilers, it's kind of the best way we could do it if humans were trying to design an afterlife. But on The Good Place, Season 4 closed this past week with the 2-part finale, Whenever You're Ready. There was a collective gasp of horror when the 4 humans finally made it to the good place, and, well, it was just such a mess that the committee in charge of making eternity fun for everyone abdicated and ran away. Well, who could blame them? Upon leaving Michael in charge of heaven, he finds their notes, abandoned on a whiteboard, ideas for improving the good place, which... these were the ones from among a room full of dozens of pieces of paper crumpled up. The ones that made it to the board were music you can eat, get more chocolate in chocolate, more hoverboards, then wait until Beyonce gets here and ask her to fix it, then fewer hoverboards somehow, trailing off with giant mini donuts, not just regular donuts. Dave will explain. Dave has not stuck around to try to explain. Lisa Kudrow's character, the philosopher Hypatia of Alexandria, somehow the exact synthesis of Ursula and Phoebe, by the way, explains that, yes, on paper, the good place is perfect. All your wants and desires met instantly, no question. But it goes on for eternity, so after you do absolutely everything you could ever want to do, you still have eternity, and your brain just kind of turns into mush. Michael... Ted Danson is the bad place architect turned good place architect. Michael points out the good place committee members who installed him as a replacement and ran away, no backsies, bye-bye, weren't humans, so they couldn't understand what the problem was. Well, Kristen Bell is Eleanor, reformed human Eleanor Shellstrop, one of the first new humans to enter the good place in 5 centuries. Eleanor points out they did put Michael completely in charge of the good place, so he's got the authority to change it and to fix it. There's a callback to something Eleanor told Michael sometime when he was having his nervous breakdown in Season 2, that all humans are a little bit sad because they know at some point they're going to die and all of this will be over. They decide, along with all the humans taking tests and getting better, that once they've made it into the good place, and once they've explored all the emerald green doors in the good place that take people through to experience any existence, any reality, any point in real or imagined history they desire for as long as they wish, that there will be a new door. That once you've done everything you care to do in the afterlife, once you're completely at peace, you can step through and be done. The story told by these actors is, at this point, amazing. Jason is ready to step through first, and then, well, Tahani has done everything she wants ever to do, but it feels like maybe she'd enjoy being an architect herself, so she joins that track, and Chidi finds that he's ready to go, but Eleanor isn't ready for him to be gone, and she tries to hold him back, but in the end, she realizes that it's time. Not before he gives probably the most beautiful description of life I've encountered anywhere, and I can't hope to match William Jackson Harper's delivery, but Chidi says, "Picture a wave in the ocean. You can see it, measure it, its height, the way the sunlight refracts when it passes through, and it's there, and you can see it. You know what it is. It's a wave. And then it crashes into the shore, and it's gone. But the water is still there. The wave was just a different way for the water to be for a little while. You know, it's one conception of death for Buddhists. The wave returns to the ocean, where it came from, and where it's supposed to be." The way this show looks at us, I really want to be the people this show feels like we can be. The wise, the giving, the empathetic, the inclusive, the loving, the sweet, the cute. I want to be these people. I want to be this world, be the world this show envisions. And even if we could just distrust people less, or be less divided, less self-centered, it's the world this show crafted. When I first heard about this show, it sounded like a goofy afterlife sitcom. Ted Danson is God, and they can't swear because it's heaven. And what a ridiculous! How am I ever going to relate to this? Now, it's like this show could have died so many times. It could have been yanked and replaced mid-season first year. I'd never... The way they did this, the world they crafted, the discussion they presented, this was all so beautiful. Season 3, not gonna lie, shaky start, but even then I was like, oh, this is just stuff they need to do to get where they need to go. And I was right. And I'm so glad I finally gave this show a fighting chance. I'm so happy, you know. You get shows like Firefly and Dollhouse, and the rug is yanked out and they never realize their full potential. And then you get shows that are allowed to just tell a complete story beginning to end, and it's perfect. Closing moments. None of us know exactly what happens when we go through that final door, but what it looks like is energy or something returns to the world of the living as inspiration that helps make the world a better place, more connected, and maybe makes this world seem a little more like the good place. A boy can dream. Thank you, Mike Schur. Thank you, Ted Danson, Kristen Bell, William Jackson Harper, Jamila Jamil, Manny Jacinto, Darcy Carden. Thank you, Marc Evan Jackson, everyone involved in crafting this universe. Thank you all so much, and all the best as you go forth and do something good. And now that we've talked about some of the best things as ever I've encountered anywhere, VideoFuzzy at the movies. It's time for the title focus of this installment, Watching Terrible Movies. A Facebook friend of mine recently asked Alexa to queue up Hail Caesar, the 2016 Coen Brothers production starring Josh Brolin and George Clooney. That is not what she served up. Instead, he found himself watching the 1994 Anthony Michael Hall production featuring Robert Downey Jr. and reviewing it live on Facebook. It sounded awful and hilarious, or at least a lot of fun to watch and make fun of, so I tracked it down along with several other movies I'd heard not great things about, and I took them with me to my friend, we're still friends now, for sure, I think, Jesse Zimmerman of the Average Movie Nerd blog. You might recall our conversation from episode 38, Shows I'm Not Watching. He had a few awful movies queued up as well, and over the course of an afternoon we watched them and then we discussed them. And here with Jesse Zimmerman, the Average Movie Nerd, and we in a new segment called
Why did they make that?
For legitimate reasons.
Well,
That's because they had the money and somebody said, all right, make this. I am fully on board.
I have to say, the movies we watched the Lost Skeleton of Cadaver. We watched, I don't remember years of these, but that one...
That was 2001.
It was 2001. It looked like it was from the 50s, and then we watched Hail Caesar, that one highly recommended by our friend John Allen. Thank you, John. In the middle there, Rockula, and I don't know why I could separate that one out from Repo, the Genetic Opera, which we did. That was 2008. Rockula was 90, so it was a vampire musical, and then Repo featured Tony Stewart Head as the Watcher from the Buffy series, so it's a bit of a vampire theme, and also featured the dancing skeleton moved around by cleverly hidden. I think it looked like they were almost computerized. They removed the traces of the fishing line. Couldn't possibly see how those were moving around by the lost skeleton. And
there was no fishing line used in the making of that movie.
No fishing line was harmed in the making of this movie. Except by being tied to a skeleton.
It's one of my favorites. It was an homage to the old 50s and 60s sci-fi, black and white sci-fi movies, and it was done with that in mind, so it was played very, very serious, but, written and done tongue-in-cheek.
Tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Because, the continual references to some of the science and the promotion of science. And
I do science.
I'm
a scientist.
I'm a scientist's wife. I'm necessarily a dingbat, but you're just so smart in comparison.
I also wonder.
The aliens would...
The planet Marva.
Aliens from the planet Marva, also a rival scientist. He's been searching for the lost skeleton of Cadaver. And he finds it.
It's like 7.5 feet inside the mouth of a cave.
To be perfectly fair, Jesse, it was
covered.
It was covered by a cloth. He had to uncover the...
Well, he was tired. I sleep now. So, yeah. I do. I really like that. They've made a few more since. They made a noir film, and then they did make a sequel to The Lost Skeleton of Cadaver as well.
They made it so one has to watch it.
Yes.
You actually purchased these.
I own them, yeah.
On purpose.
Gladly own them. I love them. These people are brilliant, and I even dressed as one of them for Halloween one year.
Well, I have to believe that turned out the skeleton, right? Or no?
No. I was the other scientist.
The other scientist.
Yes, who also wandered.
And Animala. Animala Rower.
Tip. Classic.
Well, references that you've made but are frustrated because no one understands.
Nobody knows them and nobody's seen these movies except for a handful of my friends.
Mm-hmm. But now they know what they can track down this fantastic movie.
As they should.
I felt kind of lost something by not having two small robots and an exiled researcher watching and sharing the commentary on the... yes, but... that was that one that they ever did, or this maybe Misty was done by the time.
It was. They were done doing stuff.
They've done riff tracks.
I don't know if they ever did riff tracks for that.
It's like the movie was written for such a thing.
Well, and it's one of those movies that doesn't need it because it is, an homage.
It does. Yeah, it really doesn't on itself. Fold yourself in the middle.
Yeah, you will not forget it.
No, you're right.
Always remember
that is a memorably terrible movie, and
but done on purpose.
On purpose, unlike Hail Caesar.
Which was
they did that one.
They did that one seriously with that hair.
The hair and all of the cocaine. The casting of Robert Downey Jr., who...
It wasn't really casting. I'm sure that he was there.
He was just
they all hung out together anyway. Brat Pack days.
Anthony Michael Hall and various other people who I'm sure were important at the time. But
it's some guy from Eastern Europe.
Vlad,
the drummer.
The drummer who's, I think
who makes pierogies and loves Twinkies.
And hacked computer systems by...
Because he was an accountant back in Europe.
He can guide a significant plot point at exactly the right moment, and
and Sam Jackson being attacked by a dog.
Holy Christ. I'm screaming like a girl.
Literally Samuel L. Jackson as a mailman being attacked by a Rottweiler. Well, we say attacked. This is the sweetest Rottweiler you've ever seen, and they added all the noises in post. Mm-hmm. And he was
gently nuzzling him on the...
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Sam Jackson screams like a tiny child.
It was not... That movie didn't... There were no good reasons to watch the movie. I think there were... it was very vaguely Shakespearean. The dad is...
The dad and the mother were archaeologists who were eaten by cannibals, yet Anthony Michael Hall survived as a 4-year-old, and he was named Julius Caesar because his parents were crazy.
Yeah, they were just fans of ancient Romans. Yeah. Had tracked down also the statue, or the second statue we just developed, but as a 4-year-old he was able to sort of keep that under wraps until...
It was in their house, I mean...
Well, I guess if nobody looks, you don't find it.
That's true. It's there.
Mm-hmm. And his girlfriend, her arms dealer father, is...
the owner of an eraser factory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so, plot.
Offers him $50,000, $75,000, then $100,000 to just sort of not to be dating his
daughter named Buffer.
Buffer. Makes a bet that he's going to actually make the $100,000 on his own, and I think he gave him 6 months. And he would do it by working for like $6 an hour at his factory.
It was $7.
$7 an hour at his eraser factory. Nobody did the math. The overtime he would, but he is named manager almost immediately because the other manager finds information out that they need to keep under wraps, and so they
Big Pink. The name of the secret project.
Environmental activists were going to shut everything down because of Big Pink, where the erasers were going to be made explosive.
Well, they were making plastic explosives because, an eraser factory can do such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is the 90s, so...
Yeah, there was the cocaine we mentioned.
Magic. So, yeah. And by magic, we mean copious amounts of cocaine. Yeah.
Well, there were chemicals going on.
Well, there were, legitimate chemical.
Julius Caesar, Anthony Michael Hall. Julius Caesar is he's made manager when the other manager finds out too much, and he starts finding out too much, and the dad's lickspittle is going to blow up the factory to destroy the evidence or whatever, and
reasons.
Just at the eve of Julius Caesar finding out all of the things, is, oh my God, I'm going to expose everything. Oh my God, I've got to get out of here.
And then realizing the love of his life is the bass player in his band.
Yes, the bass player in his band.
Yeah. He had a band.
Put a demo together and encountered Robert Downey Jr.
And to his credit, Anthony Michael Hall did write all those songs. So
and sang them. Yeah, he did. Didn't play them because somebody else was credited as the.
I mean, do what you got to do.
He did. He and in the end he realized the love of his life, and it was not Buffer. Buffer, I guess, she had to deal with the wreckage of her father's fallen empire,
and she was doing the squash,
banging the squash instructor. So she didn't. Yeah, it was very. Well, you say 90. It was 90s. It felt 80s, but we weren't far removed at that point.
I shot 93.
What a great film! Probably
epic.
Certainly needed to. Rockula. You foist upon. That's
Rockula.
Not fair.
It's
not fair. That was probably the most fun of the 4 movies I watched today.
Because it stars Dean Cameron, who is infamously in a 80s movie with Mark Harmon called Summer School. He played the character of Chainsaw. His mother in the movie is Tony Basil. Mm-hmm. Yes, that Tony Basil. Mm-hmm. Another friend of his happens to be Bo Diddley. Mm-hmm. So there's Bo Diddley's in the movie.
And an Oscar nominee.
And an Oscar nominee is the bartender. Mm-hmm. Chuck, the bartender. And the plot of the movie is Dean Cameron is a vampire, and has been a vampire since the 1600s, who is destined to fall in love every 22 years with the same woman, who is then killed by a rhinestone, peg-legged pirate with a ham bone. And the ham bone's very important to the plot of the story for exactly one joke at the end of the movie. Where Dean
No spoilers.
Well, spoilers. There's no spoilers.
That'd be a spoiler for a movie that came out
big spoiler. Ago. Spoiler alert. Thomas Dolby plays the pirate. Yet that Thomas Dolby, blinded by science, the inventor of the polyphonic ringtone, Thomas Dolby, plays the pirate who hits Dean Cameron's mom, who is Tony Basil. Yes, that Tony Basil. Mickey, you're so fine. With the ham bone. And Dean Cameron turns to him and says, "You just boned my mom." That is the only reason that a ham bone is the weapon of choice for the peg-legged pirate for one joke at the end of the movie. But that aside, this movie's fantastic. It's a musical, which was kind of a theme throughout the night that ended up being that way. And the music's good. I like the music. By My Side, the love ballad from Rockula. I listen to it all the time. Yeah.
I kind of like his first, the Rockula, rock flavored theme. I enjoyed the rap flavored theme.
Rockula,
it was at the. It was a reflection of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had the love ballad, as you mentioned, and I called them hats, and they weren't hats, and they were the visiting kids. But I'm sure they're a huge musical presence in Eurovision.
I'm sure,
almost certainly.
What's a good flick?
That one was fun, and I don't think it held up to as well to the theme of terrible movies. Jesse offers the Lost Skeleton of Cadabra, and I brought Hail Caesar, having purchased that with a few other terrible movies.
I've watched bad movies. I've watched those 60s and 50s cheesy sci-fi movies, and I enjoy them.
This one that we just finished watching, the
Repo, the Genetic Opera,
that was at the end, I think they referred to it as sort of like a goth opera, where you would have like it felt like it was drawn directly from comic inspiration, comic book. Even some of the perspective that they shot from would remind a person from.
They use that as exposition points to give backstory to different characters at points in the movie. It's well done. I mean, I believe it was a stage play first, and then they made it into a movie. Anthony Head was fantastic. His voice is incredible. Sarah Brightman, wonderful, wonderful. And then, I can never remember her name, but the little girl who was in Spy Kids, she's the daughter in the movie.
And does a fine job. I mean, especially if you put her up against Paris Hilton is in this movie.
Paris Hilton's in this movie. Yeah. to forewarn people, she is in this movie.
And it's entirely possible that Tony signed the contract and didn't realize who else was in the movie. But
Paul Sorvino is in it as well.
And it's sort of a
dystopian future. Yeah. Corporate America is genetically fallen to the wayside. There's some things that happen. Organs are failing for some unknown reason. Paul Sorvino creates this company, Gene Co., that has replacement organs, and then gets a law passed where if they don't pay, they can repossess the organs, thus repo. Other plot points with he was in love with Anthony's wife.
Yeah, Dr. Nathan's wife.
Yeah, doctors. And somebody poisons somebody, she dies, he has to make a decision and save the child, save the mother, he saves the child, the mother dies. 17 years later, this movie happens.
Her best friend is the child's godmother.
Sarah Brightman, the child's godmother.
And Blind Meg, the celebrity celebrity voice or face of Gene Co. She's sort of contracted to them where she can't actually break the contract because Gene Co. can repossess people's organs, and her eyes are their property, and she's like, I don't care, I'll be blind, you're Oh, and it's this gigantic opera at the end. I'd say the last third of the movie was the run-up or the actual run of the opera.
Yeah. And to quote Hedonism Bot from Futurama, surgery at an opera? How droll.
Well, you have the voice down. I was going to say Roddy's terrible children are all fighting to succeed
take over
him
the company,
because
he's got a deadly disease, incurable disease.
How ironic.
Irony.
And he feels for this diseased daughter that's always had to live her life very shut away from the world. Dr. Nathan's tragic child. Shiloh, yeah. She wants to rebel, and she wants to get out, and she wants to live her life, and she's in contact with the grave robber character who is sort of a narrator for the thing. And
I believe he's one of the writers of the movie. I believe so, yeah.
I wouldn't be terribly surprised because he was in it way too much. I just think that one, visually not dissimilar to Sucker Punch.
It has that same feel. A couple years ago, Syfy had a TV series called Blood Drive, and it somewhat similar except darker. Blood Drive took place more in the day and in the desert, but it's that same kind of dystopian future feel to it. Big corporation doing bad things.
Oh yes, and they can get away with building up some very towering drama in these situations, and almost operatic, a person might say, but it kind of felt like towards the end, all of this exacting blood revenge on stage in front of people, life and death taking place. Well,
and Terrence Zundik, the grave robber guy, he wrote, composed, was director, producer, and actor through the various incarnations of Repo.
Probably catered a few times.
I'm sure he did. He absolutely did cater.
Oh, yeah, that was the other thing with the first movie that we watched. He wrote, directed, acted in, appeared, catered. His wife catered. Faye catered. It was as ridiculous, I was saying. It was just people pantsing about in somebody's backyard, really. Why, here we have encountered a farmer along this mountain pass. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, because he'd be out.
There's a farmer.
He'd be out surveying his fields, and so he'd be growing along the side of a mountain.
Well, and Ranger Brad.
Ranger Brad
was there.
So they're not very far away from each other. You have farming, you have natural reasons.
And he was just hoping somebody would need a ranger's help. And lo and behold,
a mutant appeared.
Well, that was later.
Yeah,
to kill him, but spoilers.
Would I don't know if we could do a spoilers on a movie that's been out since. Oh goodness, yes, that movie not only
came out in 2001, came out September
12th, 2001. So the second worst thing to happen that week.
It's far from nice. Maybe fifth.
No, well, I mean, Giuliani becoming a household name or things like that, you have to encounter. But yeah, that was a lost skeleton of Cadavra. The through line was sort of self-referential comedy to differing levels. There was at least one point where Anthony Michael Hall as Julius Caesar Grunberg, or whatever his name was, addressed the camera. I think it was like somebody told him to get off the stage because the sound check had been over for hours, and he starts talking to us. And then the rest of the movie happened. The lost skeleton was constantly, I sleep now. And that, yeah, okay, so when you had mind control, but then you had no longer any mind control, you had to tell us, you had to show the audience why people weren't any longer in a trance. So that was partial comedy, but partial storytelling. It just had to happen. But then we sort of moved into like this kind of a musical through line that certainly opened in Hail Caesar with the guy is a songwriter, then into rock opera with Rockula, and into, oh God, the entire thing was either, I don't think there was dialogue.
There wasn't much spoken dialogue.
Yeah, it was all recitative or actual song. It was I suppose people would say light opera, but
I would say American opera.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Our take on it, because it wasn't 3 hours long.
No, it
felt like it in some places.
Hour 37.
And then it also didn't need to repeat itself quite as much, which is where they shaved some of the time.
Except saying Shiloh a lot.
Shiloh.
A little bit rocky.
It was rough. Jess, this has been hours of rough. I've seen
7 hours.
I've seen more. These were all movies I hadn't seen. I had not seen any of these movies before, so
I had seen all 4.
After John posted about Hail Caesar, I thought that there was like that one, and there's a few other ones that I tracked down on Amazon while I was looking for it. So, you know what? I'll just get myself to $30 and have the free shipping. It's like, I don't know, maybe I would have just paid for some shipping.
Okay.
It was just like, yeah, that was among them, and maybe at some other point we can get together again for some more terrible movies.
I've mentioned quite a few other movies throughout the day that we'll have to take a look at some point.
But I think as an inaugural, this was certainly a good introduction to the concept. So thank you so much for hosting me today, and
always
excellent company. Much better company than movie, I have to say, at least some of the time.
You have way better movies than company, sir.
No, I don't know. I think you're sweet. Yeah, and just all the best into 2020, and thank you for your time with VideoFuzzy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and I'm absolutely hoping to make this a recurring segment. Obviously, I've got plenty of media around that I want to see, but it's fun to get together and specifically tear into some schlock sometimes, so definitely looking forward to more of that as well. Upcoming shows. TBS has started airing the new season of Miracle Workers, called Miracle Workers: The Dark Ages. I caught a sneak peek airing a week or so ago, and I thought it was a fun reimagination of life at a time we could barely imagine, and yet somehow seems quite familiar. They're presenting it as an ensemble anthology in the spirit of American Horror Story, where the same cast returns and presents completely different stories. In this one, Steve Buscemi, really not God in this one, plays the town pooper scooper. Nope, they haven't even figured out outhouses here, so no wonder the plague. Geraldine Viswanathan is back as his daughter. Daniel Radcliffe is back as Prince Chauncey in an ongoing and desperate quest for his father, the evil king's approval, and other characters as we'll discover as the show continues. A bit trite, but season premiere of a completely reimagined show. There's a lot of table to set, and I'm sure it'll pick up soon enough. I saw the 5th season of Better Call Saul is premiering this month on AMC, and this week I believe the new Fran Drescher vehicle gets on the road called Indebted on NBC. USA also premieres the 3rd season of The Sinner and a new series called Briar Patch. I'll have more to say about those once I've seen them, but they look interesting. Finally, planning to take in the premiere of Birds of Prey this weekend. That looks like a hoot. Beyond that, again, special thank you to Jesse for joining me. Always so much fun, and thank you all so much for checking out my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com, past episodes at Apple Podcasts. Feedback is always appreciated, and you can contact me through my blog or podcast sites via email or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing. It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out for sure the next VideoFuzzy.